This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, hi.
What? It's so fun.
Excuse me.
Why?
Have I
Why
said
would?
something to Carla?
Ah. I don't understand why Jason would make it echoey.
I don't know that he made it echoey. It's circumstance.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't want to connect to my.
There we go.
We're good. I messed it up. Oh. Now it's just really delayed.
Okay, what about now?
Much better.
Ah.
Yeah.
Testing.
What a noob.
So wait, what happened?
Well, because you guys have your earbuds in and I didn't, so the audio was bouncing around back and forth.
Yeah, it's weird. Usually if you're playing it out of the speakers, they have like Zoom has an algorithm that sort of minimizes that.
I probably let me if you don't mind, let me experiment with that. So is there echo now?
No, there's no echo.
Okay, it's because I turned off original sound because I've been trying to do that for like a while in because the sound on Zoom is real bad, like the higher frequencies.
So yeah, they're probably doing like post-processing for noise reduction and this kind of thing, but like which works in this environment. Like right now we're talking, it's coming through the thing and it's canceling out the feedback. But if you want like different audio source stuff, yeah, it makes sense to turn that off.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Why do you turn that off? Like for
I have this. I've just read that you get a better sound, better audio, but honestly, it still is pretty bad.
Yeah,
There's not a. I did one meetup with a possible fiddle teacher on Facebook because it was so frustrating on Zoom, and it was actually better. So I don't know.
Is there lag and compression of the audio? Or is it something else?
It's something to do with the audio gets squashed to you just can't even hear it when certain high frequencies happen.
Yeah.
Really frustrating, like trying to like play back and forth. So I feel like there's got to be a better platform.
I'm sure.
Taking the time to find it.
I mean, it's going to be in professional circles first, like because you imagine that like people who needed to work remotely at like a higher fidelity, they're building the software to do this. I know that they have it internally for certain, like they're doing it for visual tooling for like movies and stuff like this. Yeah, there's probably like ways to VPN and create like a stable connection between and then share an audio source. Rather than going through the like sort of Zoom piping, which is for like co-presence, but not fidelity. Like, yeah, I'm sure something's out there. It'll be affordable at some point here.
I'm really curious to see if somebody solves the latency problem.
Yeah.
If there's a way, from what I understand, there's just physics gets in the way because if you're on the other side of the world, it just takes that much longer, that many extra milliseconds. And so there's going to be a delay. But I wonder if there's like a workaround. We might have talked about this before, but if you had like a clock, if you had like a clock to play to, and which wouldn't work for all kinds of music, like if you had certain, but I don't know. It's just anyway.
Yeah, there's some standard form. I don't understand enough of the like technical limitations, but like if the technical limitations are the upper limit, and it's unlikely that those are going to get solved, right? Like because of the latency and bandwidth, like I bet you there are versions of this that they've solved in video games, because you have a lot of people doing like collaborative or competitive play, right? Which means that you need to orient to a world together. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, the network stuff is working there.
Mm.
So one of the things that can happen here is if the instruments are electronic, they could transmit like lower fidelity data. Like, so you don't need to transmit the whole feed, just like sensor data from the instrument that you're playing. And then that's really lightweight, which means you could
Yeah.
speed up, right? But you're not going to get to play. And I mean, I don't know how it works with like something like a fiddle and like how to be able to capture that data
That
where
makes
it's not.
that
Yeah.
that's such a good explanation. I definitely see how that would that whole explanation of how if you did have less information, like you didn't have all that audio, it's a huge
Yeah.
thing, huge file. You just had like smaller, lighter weight signals that would be a lot closer to making it work. Gosh, that's a
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, but yeah, it would limit things, but then it would probably open up new possibilities. But you would just have, if you're
Yeah.
all doing electronic versions of an instrument.
Yeah. Then it's about finding the interface between whatever is being captured, right? Sensor interface, and then what's playable, because like obviously you could do stuff like, I mean, like MIDI stuff works this way, kind of like you're just
Yeah.
sending code around. Yeah, I'm sure that people are creating abstractions for this to capture some standard form of musical data.
Yeah, you could even I can imagine doing this with acoustic instruments if you
Mm,
added if you made them like cyborgs basically.
yeah,
Mm.
You turn it
yeah,
you put like the sensors on like the neck and on the
mm,
strings, and it would probably be really expensive to do all this at first, but then when you play that, it's not sending audio files, it's sending that like it's like a video game controller you've turned
yeah,
your instrument
exactly.
into. Oh, that's really
Yeah,
fun. It's fun. Somebody's gonna do that.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. If you
Well,
could think it up, yeah, people are playing with it, right?
probably,
People have to be playing with ways to play music online now after the
yeah.
quarantine. It has to be a big thing that they're,
Well,
yeah.
that game Rock Band is like a primitive version of this, right?
Yeah.
Because like
Fun
you
game.
can play, yeah, exactly. Like it's got, the minimum, like, electronically mediated like data that you can bring in, right? Like the guitar is not an actual guitar. It's a synthesized
Yeah,
version of that,
yeah,
like that responds to software or whatever. So yeah, like I'm sure people are playing with this. But yeah, be
Can
interesting to
you
find. Yeah.
can you
Hmm.
learn how to play instruments through Rock Band? Or is it too much of an abstraction? Like,
It's not, no, you can't. But
Yeah.
you can
yeah,
get a feel for the what you can learn, Kristen,
tempo,
is to
yeah.
listen. You can listen to the music, and
Hmm.
it forces you to really listen and hear those parts.
Yeah.
But it's been a while since I played it, but you're not actually playing the actual fingers and stuff. But you really have to listen for rhythms and
Yeah.
kind of different changes. They even have singing, and so it you match your pitch to, but
Fun.
you could be pretty poor singer, and you just kind of have to be good at following.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but it's got to improve your musical skills to a degree. But yeah,
Sure.
that it would be fun to see somebody take it to the next level and actually you use it to learn an instrument that you could
Hmm.
Yeah.
play.
Yeah. I think there's some software like that. Um, I haven't run into it. My friend Pascal might know a bunch more about that because he was looking into, well, I mean, he was building sort of instrumentation, loopy kinds of things. And
Oh
was
yeah.
it yeah, he had like an app called Keezy that was like this looper toy you know, kind of app.
Oh,
Which
cool.
and he played around in that world a bunch.
Is that still around, his app, or did he launch it?
Maybe, yeah, it got out the door.
What's it called? What's it called?
It's called Keezy. I don't know if it's still up.
Okay.
How do you spell that? Keezy.
Keezy.
I would actually like something like that. I've been thinking because I have done quite a bit of like looping with external gear,
Yeah,
and I would like to find kind of a fun way to do it. Yeah, I'm sure there's something out there. I just haven't
yeah.
looked.
There's a bunch
But
of little.
but
Yeah, he
something
did. Yeah,
lightweight, like less
yep,
like did you have this huge learning curve where you just get in and you
totally.
can play stuff?
That's what this was. It was basically like a keypad, and then you could record whatever, doo-doo, and then like just with the phone, you didn't need anything.
Oh,
Great.
it's just with the phone.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Pascal makes cool things.
Hmm.
Tell me about where you guys are at. It looks very it looks like you're in like you're like a California living room or something. It looks like the
Yeah.
same
I mean,
thing.
basically, I mean, this is some sort of hot dog sundae. We're not really sure
Yeah,
what.
kidding.
It's very textured. And then there's some, some
We
Oh,
moved we
cheese.
moved the dining room table upstairs so that we
Hmm.
could have like a workspace.
oh
And
wow.
there's my yoga space, and then yeah, here's the
Wait, keep going. That's cool. Oh, that's beautiful. Is this Rosarita?
No, it's Playa La Mission.
La Mission.
La Mission,
Is it
I
near
can't
Rosarita or somewhere else?
south
I can't see. Can you see?
of Rosarita.
How far south?
I mean, like
Not far.
30 minutes, 20
Yeah.
minutes, somewhere
Are
like
there
that.
any sand dune beaches? I went to one around there once. That was really fun.
Yeah, just north of here, there's
Yeah.
one that mostly it's used for like
ATVs?
off-road. Yeah, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Is
Yeah,
it called Sand Canteen with a Q?
maybe. I'm
Oh,
not sure. I didn't see a
yeah.
There's Dave.
Hey, Dave. Ah, that's cool. Nice play. How long are you guys there for?
rest of the month.
Yeah, if you want to come down, you should come down.
Love to.
We're
We've got
here.
kind of a busy month. I don't know if I can.
Yeah,
Well,
understandable. How was
you've got it.
Michigan?
You've got an invitation,
Thank
if
you.
nothing
Thank
else.
you. And well, let me field your Michigan question in a sec.
Yeah,
Before I
fine.
forget, are you guys is there any news on the Thinking Tools conference?
No, not anything. Well, we should ask. So we're living with our friend John. He is in Tijuana for the night because he's dating a girl who he met in Mexico City. So she flew up to Tijuana and he's meeting her there, and they're spending the night with friends and coming back. But the long and short of that is he's the one that I think is sort of spearheading this conference, or gathering, I guess is more like it. So he might
Yeah.
have more information. We can ask him.
Cool. That sounds cool.
Definitely the
Interesting.
fall, because I guess it's the rainy season right now in Mexico City, which is surprising because you wouldn't think so. But yeah, apparently
Yeah.
the mountains create a bowl of smog, is how we described it last night. They trap all the air in there, so depending on what is going on, so if it's like super rainy, like waters rush in through the city too, apparently. It's interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
And do you like where you're at there?
we do. We're a little bit close to the freeway, which we didn't think about ahead of time. So there's like other locations here where it's a little bit quieter on the traffic front
Yeah.
because it's like a coastal freeway, which is, it's fine. I mean, whatever, but it's a little loud sometimes.
Yeah, being outside, like I like to sort of sit and write, or like do qigong and stuff outside, and it's a bit like
Busy.
every
Yeah.
5 seconds there's like a truck air braking. And you're just like, all right. And you can kind of hear the ocean, kind of hear birds, but it's like, gotta sort of,
Yeah.
it's fine. I mean, we're Oceanside, but yeah, like we've met a bunch of people here, which has been cool. And they're like just sort of retired hippies mostly. There's some younger folks. There's a cafe up the way that is walkable. And it's sort of like a meeting place, and they got music and stuff.
And is that where how you met the various people there? Just the cafes, or just kind of hanging out?
A little of
Cafe
that,
and
and then
walking.
yeah, walking around the community. There's like a sort of distinct, sort of gated community here, and then like an estuary with a road that leads down into a village. And then it's at a crossroads between that coastal road and a road that runs inland towards all the wineries. So there's like an interesting like landing place here.
Via de Guadalupe. You may have heard of it. Apparently it's a big place
like wine
that
region.
people in Southern California go. I guess more so San Diego because it's so close.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You could just drive.
Yeah.
A day trip even, like I think you could do. It'd be a long day trip, but definitely weekend trips.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like it's an interesting sort of vibe. Like definitely feels not in the United States, but adjacent. Like there's still like there's a lot of Americans around, but it's pretty Mexican.
Yeah, pretty Mexican, but also like we just met a woman who so there next to the cafe there's a really good pizza place, and just very fresh, like all the ingredients. It's Mexican cooks, but the woman that waited on us tonight, she was Italian. So there's like an interesting like confluence, and we were talking about it. I'm guessing that a lot of coastal cities outside of the United States just attract people from everywhere because it's less expensive. Life is pretty simple. Like there's no big industry around here. I mean, I think the biggest industry might be like the winery stuff down the road, but yeah, it's so laid back. Yep. So people come through and then they get stuck. Like they're just like, this is nice. Yeah. We like it here. We knew someone here. That's always the story. Like we've been asking people, like, how did you find, because they ask us, how'd you end up here? And we're like, how did you end up here? Someone's like, oh, come check it out. You'll like it here. And then they come check it out and they're like, I like it here. It's nice.
Yeah. Mexico is so laid back. I love getting in the groove of life there and just eating the food and starting to meet people, and it's quite nice.
Pretty good.
Are you guys finding yourself to be productive there, or are you more relaxing and just taking things as they come?
Pretty productive because we were in Los Angeles and before that San Diego, and it's super like social there and like urban. So there's all these like lots of places to eat, it's the US thing where everything's so accessible and like there's culture everywhere in the city. There's no city like close by. It's like smaller towns. So there's less of a draw to go explore. Like you can explore, and we've been doing a bit of that, but it's more of we're in a place like a nice house, and then we're with John, who we've been working on a project with. So it's been nice because I feel like we're getting a lot of work done because it's like the water cooler chats where like John and I started talking earlier, and then Dave came upstairs and was like, I heard talking, and then we got into something and we talked for like over an hour. So just little things like that, which are really nice.
Yeah, we're mapping each other's territory some, which is nice when you spend a bunch of time together.
In the house.
Yeah. Because,
in
there's
the house mentally.
Yeah, both. Mental house. Yeah.
Tell me about, well, that, the mental mapping and how that works, and then also about the project you're working on. And with John, you mentioned, Kristen, that you're working on something with John.
Yeah. So how much have we told you about what we were calling or are calling Buzzard? We told you about that, buzzard.life.
Well, basically that you were creating, I probably didn't understand it properly, but like a place for people to publish stuff,
Yeah.
and I think that's what you were working on.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Still, it's the same project. We've sort of started to call it decentralized publishing, where, yeah, I think the easiest way I would describe it after today is we're trying to create a place where people can post about things that are interesting to them, that have some meaning for them. And it's less important that I, as an individual, am posting the information. It's more important that this idea or this content has a place to live where other people can see the content and add to it. So it's trying to find a way that's idea centric or content focused versus individual actor or ego identity focused. Yeah, like a place where ideas can play.
And are these ideas in written form mostly?
They could be anything. Part of the thing that we struggle with is that, and why this is a project, we're having a difficult time communicating across all of the different mediums that exist and apps and tooling. So like we have a Telegram channel with John and 2 other people. And then we've got buzzard.life. And then we use Figma sometimes so we can have a canvas. And then we're on Zoom. And then there's a YouTube channel, and it's just, so how do you how do the ideas that are contained in all of those different media play? Like, where do you draw connections and work with the information? It's hard to do it in any of the existing software. So we're piecing it together in the best way we can with what exists. So it's like off the shelf. So in some ways, I guess like we're prototyping what we would like to see in a piece of software if we were to build something, which is good. So we have a better idea for what we would like before we're not rushing into building software.
What if you somehow automate every little product that gets made in all those apps like Figma and YouTube so that they wind up on Buzzard?
Yeah, that would be useful.
So a lot of what we're playing with is the like underlying format that would allow that automation to happen.
Okay.
So like the automation, like if we're, so ultimately what we're trying to build is, I mean, the sort of design aspiration of what we're talking about building is a thing called relational OS, which is like the imagining is, what if there were an operating system where all of the media items within the operating system understood where all the other items were. They are relational. And you could query based on this information. So like in existing operating systems, you have files, and the files are inert effectively. They are only connected by the container and categories that they're in. And you have like little things where, you know, tagging and sort of now with Roam or whatever, you can sort of backlink and this kind of thing. But what if natively there were a layer of data where everything was connected? So that's the sort of big what if. And then what is like how do we mimic doing that? And then, without building the software just yet, we're playing games to sort of bubble up data that would be built in. And so there's also an ethos to the way that this works, which is it's collaborative. Rather than like individualistic. So, or both rather. So the general idea is that like you are in a squad or a swarm of people. And that could be like from, I don't know, 3 to X number of people. I don't know what X is, an upper limit of hundreds at least. And you are all sharing a sort of knowledge bubble. Like all of the information within that bubble is interrelated and accessible to everyone else. And there are practices that like help you write in a way that is, or produce content or respond and play with each other in this, so that it sort of helps this group of people form a collective intelligence of some sort, So yeah.
Can we, it would be possible to imagine like an example case, like of some idea that gets built? Can we like do a thought experiment, or is it not, is it maybe too abstract of a state now?
No, we can try.
like, I mean, what would people like work in the same sort of workspace together? Let's say you're working on a video aspect of this or something.
Mm-hmm.
Is the idea that you're doing like collective editing and filming or something, or is it more just the sharing of ideas that which almost sounds like more could function like with text or something, like you're sharing ideas and building out ideas that you hold common, or you've worked out together. It's like you're thinking together is what
Yep.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like this is where we started with ponder, thinking together. Was one of the like taglines. Okay, so let's use the video example. Where should we start in the sort of lifespan of the video, like to try to flesh out an example? Because do we have an idea for the video already?
Yeah, it's weird to think about, because I've worked. So usually like an idea starts with one person, I guess. So like want to do this thing. Well, yeah, we could just do like one example would be like Dave's videos. I want to eventually put music to one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
maybe Dave posts his videos and be like, "Hey, does anybody want to do anything fun with
Okay,
this?"
this is perfect. Yeah.
And then
So
I think
yeah.
like, yeah, I've wanted to here's a piece of music, and then I could maybe fly that in and mess around with it, and then just like in a chat on the side be like, hey Dave, what do you think? Is this placed well? Is this a good length? Whatever. And then we take it from there.
So now imagine if we were in a file ecosystem, a media ecosystem, where every time I go and do a shoot, like a video shoot, I put the files or the videos, however they're arranged, just save them into my instance, right? With relation to me. You have access to all of that, right? I'm just doing it as like a practice. Like I'm producing all of this stuff anyway, right? You have access to my file system now. And because we are in some relation within this sphere, you can see all this stuff. And you're like, oh, this one seems neat. I can do something with it. And then you can mock something up, and then sort of I get pinged somehow, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. and then I
how
can
would I
do
find
something.
out? How would I find out that you had posted something, and how would you find out? Well, I guess you would find out if you're making these things. You'll see something happened with it. But what
Yeah, so
happened?
this is upstream of that. Like, so the general principle here is that like we are making stuff around each other and sort of paying attention to each other's work, right? And so if you are putting all of your thinking into the system, right, and the thinking can be through whatever medium, um, we can figure out ways to, like, you know, the minimum way is that like you can sort of follow a feed of the kinds of things that I'm making, right? Like you become interested in like sort of video projects, and you, like, for the simplest version of this is like subscribing to a feed of that stuff, or you can check in with like a sort of organized pool of this stuff that I've put together in my own space. You can kind of look at it from my perspective and see what's in there. Maybe pull something from that, like add it to your own. Or the better way of doing this is potentially like playing games where some of this stuff is surfaced. So say for instance, we don't know each other yet, right? And there's a broader game, a play where like people are sort of offering bits of creative material looking for collaboration, right? And like there's some series of events or whatever where I'm like, here's a bunch of videos, I don't know what to do with them, right? And in this like sort of contained context, you're like, I've got a bunch of music, and then we are sharing a canvas effectively, right? You're like, stick this on that, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, what about this? Like, you know, there's a rehashing or a remixing mentality, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's, you know, that's a loose version of this.
I see the
Yeah,
remixing, how that works. I don't quite yet see how it's set up like a game.
sure.
I
Uh,
maybe I could try harder, but I don't quite.
no, I mean, like
No,
this one, that one's really loose. Like that's more like ending up in TikTok territory here. Um, I think that a better angle on this, or an angle that we have felt more comfortable with this, is around like working on thinking and thought and conversation and like sort of knowledge production, this kind of thing. And I think some of those patterns can relate to the creative process, but it's a different kind of creativity, I guess. Like it's emergent creativity. So like the general idea there is that like I could see an example of this where artists are sharing space. Like think of it like a studio, and you're coming in, you're all making stuff, and like you're trying to find overlaps where you can collaborate in new forms. And to do that, you need to see what everybody else is working on. So this is where like you're in a studio with a bunch of artists, and you're passing by each other's stuff, and you're eating with each other, and you're like playing music together, or you're hanging out, and you're like, oh, you're doing that thing, like I'm kind of doing this thing. Like what if we stuck them together? And then the medium that we're creating will like help you find those people and find their work and all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
There's like a game logic that can be played, you know, in the yeah, I don't know. Anyways, this is the
Yeah,
level of abstraction we're at currently.
yeah.
I think that the games can be used to unearth or surface relationship or
Yeah,
connections in thinking. So it's like a way to collaborate in a fun way. So maybe like
yeah,
it's sort of a precursor to, I know I want to work with Dave and add music to his videos. So
yep,
that has emerged in a friendship because you're relating to each other and like you like loosely having like sort of like a studio relationship, not really though, like, but sharing
yeah,
what you're making. But I think we're suggesting that there can be a place where you could share more of works in progress before they get to YouTube perhaps. So, and the thinking behind what goes into that kind of work. So
Hmm.
Yeah, like, and you could then interact with Dave's the work itself of creating the art, and the thinking behind. You can interact with all kinds of different layers of it if he's sharing this stuff within the system, and he's mostly sharing it for himself to understand like his
Yeah.
process and why it's important, because he's an artist, he's doing his work and he's trying to figure it out, and he's putting it out there so that the squad or the community can kind of be like, even simple things of like, hey, this is cool, like it makes me think of a game or a project that I'm working on, and then you just link that up. Or yeah, or I've been doing something really similar, would you like to collaborate? Here's a link to like my whole, like a bunch of
Yeah.
information. I mean, it's all of these things, but games in lieu of having a pre-existing relationship where you might be sharing that kind of content.
Games as a mechanism for unearthing potential projects, like having them emerge. So like the games are basically oriented towards types of collaboration. Like, you know, get into and that can be across a bunch of different type of media. Like the stuff that's making the most sense with the initial people working on this are we're using these techniques to uncover what we're trying to build, right? There's a fractal nature to that. So like we know that we're trying to operate in a medium that is like all of these different types of media, right? We know that much. We know that like we know that we don't know certain things. So let's design a game that might uncover like some more information to figure out what we're doing, right? So like the process builds itself, right? And ideally, what we're doing is we are documenting all of this so that eventually we can offer potentially like game tooling, so people can do this of their own accord without having to bring it from the ground directly, right?
Yep.
So like, here's a mechanism for building a game. You know, like take 4 people and then have them all read an article, and they put their responses to the article in a box. And then after a certain amount of time, you know, at an agreed upon location, open the box together and take a look at the information within the box and record the corresponding result of that, right? And then there's a next stage to that game, and what, you know, who knows, there's emergent qualities from this. And if those people have coordinated together, they have found each other based on common interest or common problem set, or like, you know, maybe some sort of mutually defined loose willingness to collaborate. Like there's a depth that gets built here, and then maybe, you know, maybe they can continue in collaboration around a certain idea, right? This kind of thing. And there's tooling to help that happen in a distributed way. And then eventually an economy as well to provide sustainability in this play, this style of play.
Yeah, that almost seems like, as you're talking, both of you, I was thinking that could play into the game aspect of it. Like there could be like points or something. It's kind of an old term, it seems like now, to use the word points for a game. But there could be something that you earn that as you interact with others or with games and stuff, and you know, if you help certain ideas that are existing, you know, further along, you get like a little helper badge, or I don't know, that's whatever. It seems like that could play. I could see that being a game aspect, and also some kind of like like economic aspect too.
Yeah, there's I mean, this is where the like sort of crypto token systems come in. Like there's some act within the system that like has a reward this is where identity and tracking like who did what in the system and all of this other stuff comes in. And like sort of self-selecting roles to contribute in ways that the system can monitor. Like, and that could be you're writing something, you're editing something, you're remixing something, you're curating something. I don't know about all that stuff yet, but there is some like prescribed value to play, which we need to figure out. So we'll play with a bunch of experiments there, I think. And then there is a sort of another layer of play, which is once artifacts start emerging, because we are designing games for emergence, there will be like some consolidation of thinking or artistic ability or whatever. And there's like an internal economy within the collaborative, within that bubble of 6 to X hundred people or whatever. And people are exchanging and playing, with the idea to continue this play. And then there's probably some subset of those people who can then take the byproduct of play, the artifacts, and then sell them to a broader market, like have it market mediated, which means that money can be coming in from an external source to continue the play, right? So, but creating a buffer zone there so that individuals don't necessarily have to mediate their own work to the market, and you can sort of, there's a balance of trade somehow there.
So can I pause you for a sec?
Yeah.
So you have, just retracing what you just said, you have maybe a big set of people who have contributed to a thing,
Yeah.
like a video, and then at some point money is made from that by, you said, a smaller subset of people.
So say, for instance, I mean, in a corporation, you have a marketing department, you have accounting, you have all of these kinds of things. That structure can still work here, but the difference is it's not hierarchical in there's a boss and, a hierarchy that is trickling down ideas. The ideas are coming from peer relationships, right? People who are coming together to discover something within a shared like area of interest. And so we think that the way to emerge good ideas there are, you're interested in this, you have some skills, start playing with each other. Just do little things together, do little projects, right? And everybody chooses to be there. Nobody's paying you to be there, right? Necessarily. But through this being there together and enacting whatever these games are and these little pieces of work and stuff, there can be a reward system, like an economy develops. You can pay each other potentially. You can exchange work. You can put out feelers for a particular area of interest and see if anybody else wants to participate. There's a bunch of exchange type things that can happen here. The product of this is it is insular in the sense that you are all playing the same game, and it is a collaborative effort, not a competitive effort. Like, nobody's trying to get ahead in this system. You are trying to build tooling and information and thinking so that you can create more complex play. And my assumption, I think our assumption, is that style will produce artifacts that are valuable in some way, right? So in the case of like a video or a movie or something, like a movie emerges, and part of the process of that movie emerging is offering it to a wider audience. Like, let's get it out there in the world, right? But the ownership and the property aspect of this thing is held in common within the collaborative, right? Rather than like a single person with a, I don't know how this particularly works, but like there is some way that the collaborative can offer this good to the like a broader public, and recoup like physical or dollars, like probably, if that's the medium of exchange, and feed that back into the continuation of play within the collaborative without like, you can figure out different distribution models based on like having monitored the production of the work all the way from the interface upwards, because you're making everything in there, and you know who did what to some degree, and you can trace the lineage on who is doing what. So there's the possibility of like rewarding the entirety of the collaborative to continue doing their work. So that's like the, yeah.
How would it be signaled, or how would it be done? Who would say this is done and post it?
I
Like
think
what?
that's an agreed upon thing. Like when things are ready, they're ready, right? Like, because you're all building it together, you're feeling into the next part of it. And at a certain point, like say, uh, I don't know, are we ready to push this? We're ready to push it. And then like there's some pipeline that determines readiness based on the type of squad that is operating, right? So like in the case of a band, how do you know your album is done?
Yeah, that's a
You
good
just know.
question.
You know it's as done as it's gonna get, right? Like we
Right,
can't
but
do anything else to this.
that's people in a room playing. What about,
Yeah,
this is presumably happening online, all online.
yeah.
How are you going to all sign off on it and just let it and agree that it's done? Maybe you don't all agree.
That's fine. Enough. So this is where coordination methodology, like, part of it is that the artifact in a digital sense doesn't ever have to be done. It just has to be releasable, right? Because you can always update it because it exists
Mm.
in a digital space. Like, and if somebody wants to come along and fork it and make their own version of it, they can do that. Like make a new ending to the thing, create another logical piece to it, extend it.
But they would have to
Like
be in the collective, this particular collective.
depends on how you release it and how
Right.
the ideal scenario here is that some amount of this stuff can be released to the commons so that more people can play, because if you create an economy in which people can make money off of or like build a living around these things, and you are freely sharing componentry, this is like how open source software works and these kinds of things, then you get an ecosystem that develops and people will earn their living, which means that they will contribute back to the ecosystem, right? And so
Yeah.
you rise together through sharing, being generous, right?
Yeah.
But you have to capture the value there. It can't just be an altruistic endeavor because it'll collapse. The bigger entities will see the value and come and collect it for themselves. So it has to be, it has to have a sophistication in working with the market on its own terms. Yeah, and I don't know, I think the byproduct of working in this way is a lot healthier for creatives, for sure. Like it's more fun to do stuff together. Um, and being an active participant in how the money is distributed, how the decision making is made, like is part of how you participate in the game. And hopefully this is where code can come in. Enacted participation can have weighting. Like, so this might be too abstract, but basically the system should be able to sense directionality and then bubble that up so that certain people can like be like, hey, I think we're heading in this direction, and here's like a query that shows over the network the kinds of work that's being done, which is an ad hoc vote for movement in that direction, right? So like, or you don't have to have explicitly like I vote on this proposal. I mean, that can happen sometimes. You can have proposals to move in a certain direction, and that can be one of the mechanisms. And the people who are willing to participate in that proposal, they bring it to life. If the proposal gets no participants, it's not alive. It won't go anywhere. So you have a self-organizing direction of the like
All
sort of
right.
hive.
So maybe you're making a movie, and at some point in the timeline of the movie, somebody says, "Well, let's kill off Jeff right here." Say Jeff is like an ice cream man in the movie. Let's kill him off, and then and then 10 people love the idea and one person just thinks it's horrible, but because 10 people are like, yeah, let's do it, and they offered up a whole bunch of supporting ideas on how to kill Jeff, then it goes through somehow, and it doesn't have to. It sounds less like voting, although I'm not sure. But anyhow, at some point, something could happen that way. But or
Yeah.
what you're also suggesting that there's maybe something less explicit that than somebody posting a proposal.
I think it's a combination of these kinds of things. Like whatever data that you can bubble up to help inform the people who are operating in collaboration to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. So right now this happens in the corporations, like in the big tech companies. They have all kinds of fucking data on what you're doing
like
within
data
that system.
feeds and algorithms analyzing the data to point you towards certain things. Yeah.
And you don't know. You have nothing to do with that other than like you
As a
go and act in
customer.
there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So like as a user of the system, like you are offering behaviors to like groups of psychologists to figure out algorithms to make you want things, but that's just one style of monitoring like behavior and like having decision making based on content consumption and a bunch of other stuff. So we could do this in another way where we are like it's a style of like sort of journaling in a sense, right? Like you are collecting the behaviors that you have within a system, patterns, likelihoods, interactions, relationships, and those can be bubbled up as generalized information about the group, and then decisions could be made based on an understanding of this data, right? Or you could write algorithms to like, if we are headed in this direction, you have contracts that fire off and stuff happens there. Like, if we can manage as a group to move in this direction and hit this target or whatever, that'll unlock some funds, so you have like incentives and there's all kinds of governance stuff. I think there's like a field of coordination called cybernetics that touches on this stuff.
What is cybernetics?
This is very small-minded of me, but this sounds like a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
If we were to do it alone, but if you got a bunch of weird nerds who love doing this shit,
right,
then all you paint a picture and then they show up and they play with each other. That's
right.
how this works.
I wonder how you could start. I mean, I guess you guys are already starting. Like my question was going to be, I wonder how you could just start doing it and building it out with something small. Okay, because I guess just hearing about it, it seems like very daunting in terms of actually making it. But then again, I'm making the mistake of looking jumping to the end of the story instead of just like, well, what's the next little step?
Yep.
Yeah, that's been the challenge and the practice, is just like trusting that we're going somewhere and not knowing where we're going, which is weird, but that will unearth whatever it is that more technically or specifically what we're trying to build. So we're starting with, even conceptually, we're like, what is happening? What are you saying? How are you, like, it's very high level, like trying to ground ourselves, and everybody understands things differently. So we're trying to like triangulate, like, what someone's understanding is. And yeah, it's fun though.
So maybe though, like what you guys were talking about in earlier conversations about the operating system, like personal operating system, or like principles, maybe like working on those, then that could be sort of the guiding principles for people you attract, like the idea of collaboration and the idea of creating some kind of sharing economy, and all these ideas will attract. And maybe have you kind of defined some like core principles that would be easily understood and recognized?
Not as such. So the definitional process works where it's enacted. So we have a premise that like, okay, so people want to share and play together, right? Okay, there's a hypothesis. So design an experiment, which is a game, and then play the game together and prove out if that's true. And in the process of play, you develop artifacts and the discussion of the play. And from the discussion of the play, you will start to get like little phrases and like nomenclature and like little certainties that you can rely on, little mechanisms of play, like, you know, like the black box is a version of this. Like if you put a bunch of stuff in a box and nobody can see it, and then you open it up together, like that produces a result that is consistent in some way, right? And so I think the principles and the boundaries of play will show themselves through playing, like
Yeah.
and theorizing about the play. So rather than sitting down and coming up with constraints, we get together like this and talk about the boundary conditions that we're playing within. And inevitably what emerges is a collective understanding of some level of where we're at. And then it speaks itself forward and we write it down. Yeah, so that's one of them. If you get together in good faith and talk about the thing you're building, it will tell you what it wants to be. So there's a principle.
Yeah.
Or something like one, you know.
That it
What
will
principle?
emergence. This seems like it.
It's designing for emergence. Yes. Like what is the methodology and the art of designing for emergence?
Right.
Which is a collective practice.
One thing we've noticed is that you have to build trust in order to do this stuff because it's vulnerable, because you're like, there's a lot of not knowing. I don't know what I'm saying right now. I don't know what I'm making right now. I don't really, so there's a lot of sort of like team building to get up to the point. Like, I mean, there's definitely like a reciprocal opening sort of feel to the trajectory with the team, the people we're working with, where the more time we spend together, the more little games we do together, the more we're unearthing. And it's getting more and more complex, but we're able to make sense of more of it at the same time. It's interesting. Slow, but like that one, like trust, like building trust, like that's definitely a principle here. Trust through enacted experiential like play.
Yeah.
You have to have skin in the game. You're making things together.
Yeah. And you have to be vulnerable together. Like you make something and you stick your neck out a little bit, and then everybody sees that you stuck your neck out. You stuck your neck out, and
you knocked your stuck out.
You stuck your neck out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a trip, is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? Is there anything that you see that might pop out soon? Like any small little step?
The best thing we have right now is buzzard.life. But it doesn't really do justice to what we're doing.
Sure.
The fidelity of it is so low.
Right.
I don't know. Dave, it's weird. So the concept of like hypermedia, like what we're creating, you kind of have to immerse yourself in. So it's hard for an outside entity unless you're going to go listen to YouTube or watch YouTube videos that we're posting, read stuff on buzzard.life, maybe consume some of the resources we're talking about, talk with us. Like, it's hard to get into the mindset of what we're doing right now. So we're actually struggling with this because people are interested in what we're doing. And it's this question of like, how do we involve other people? And we're just like, we don't know right now because we don't know what we're doing. But the sense is like, if you bring more people into it, it's just going to get messier unless they're the right people that will sort of click into place and just be like, oh, you should probably do this here. And you're like, oh, I never would have thought of that. So we're sort of wrestling with that right now.
Yeah, just taking a look at the photo sharing game.
Oh yeah.
And that's just wherever you're at, you take a photo, right?
Yep. That one was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that was like the simplest early expression. Like if you go to game 4, you can see where we're at there. Like the level of complexity that's popping out.
Just with this game, I'm just curious. I didn't read the rules because you were talking, and I want to keep listening.
Yeah.
Is part of the game to write about the photo? Because I see everybody's written a good deal about it.
Tell a story about whatever aspect of the photo. Yeah.
Okay.
Or your experience in the moment of taking whatever. Like we were pretty loose around the rules of what to write, but just write something.
No, this is cool. I'm glad I saw this. It's cool. These games make sense.
Yeah, we're trying to create an emergent context. The agreement is that we show up and do this thing. And then the proof, like with very little rules other than like post anything within this constraint, then you have, we trust that whatever comes of this thing will be worth doing. We don't know what's on the other side of it, right? And then when you unpack everything, like you get a look at the world through other people's eyes, unmediated by like, I don't know, an attention game or something. Like the intention that you can go into the thing with is like, I'm just going to snapshot my felt sense of this. And that can be different for everybody. Mine is more prose and like sort of, who knows, right? Somebody else's might be a little bit more analytical, or they're thinking about like how a parking garage gets put together. Who knows, right? Like there's all kinds of different instantiations. And yeah, like you get to see a little snapshot of people's curiosity on the world or whatever that looks like. So yeah, it's a small bonding. And
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's kind of, yes, it's like being in a band, but you're doing multimedia. You're writing.
This is the best. This has been my instinct on it. Like being around musicians has been the best, like sort of feeling into people who do this regularly as necessity, right?
Yeah, like I wonder if you could have. Well, I mean, you have that daily photo sharing experiment. It's almost like band practice. You meet once a week or twice a week or whatever.
Yep.
You get together. Do you have regular meetings then with the group?
Yep.
Not necessarily scheduled ahead of time, but like we don't have like a schedule. Like it's sort of, we decide at the meeting we're currently at because we tend to design the next phase or game of play when we're meeting to talk about what happened during the last phase. So it's mostly synchronous with these like sync moments so we can get on the same page and be in the same
asynchronous time. Yeah.
Sorry.
The meetings are like once a week around that, and then like they've been a little bit denser depending on who we're around. So in San Diego, we were around CJ a lot, so we got to hang out in person, and that offers like a higher fidelity, and things start cranking along a little bit along certain areas.
Yeah.
Then in LA, CJ came up once, and then Sharuz was out there, so we were able to hang out with him. And then we're still doing our calls, right? So, and then now we're hanging out with John. We're living with him, so there's the we're churning through some more of the like high level stuff here, and then we're also, we had a talk with CJ today on a separate kind of thing, like going through a Heidegger piece, and so like it's we're enacting the damn thing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do CJ and John, do they have other projects going?
Yeah.
Or
John has
jobs?
like a million things going. John
Yeah.
has like a day job. That's like, I guess, more of a 9 to 5. It's a full-time job. He's on a team. It's a startup software.
Yeah.
And then he's working on this and another side project, and I think maybe even another side project, and it's too much. Like he's just like, it's way too much right now. And he's living nomadically, so he's just like, he's 24, so he's got a lot of energy. Yeah.
He's finding his limits.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know that even someone that was 30 years old would be able to do that. Like there's a youthful energy that he brings to it, and he knows it. He's talking about it now. He's like, it's too much.
Yeah, he's filtering through this stuff, but yeah.
And then CJ does not have a full-time job. He saved up money working for Qualcomm and then left. He surfs and rock climbs. Those are his projects basically. And this, I don't know if he's doing anything else. Like, I mean, he does his own like free study, I guess, or free work. Yeah. Sharuz has a bunch of stuff he's working on, but no jobby job. He's kind of
he's carved out space to find the next thing here, and like our projects sort of overlap, I think. And I mean, I'm hoping to find more people like in that sort of realm, like come around, let's goof around on the idea. Maybe you have like some specialized knowledge or like sort of polymathic knowledge across a few areas, and that might fill in some blanks. So that I think that you're asking like, something that might get released, or I think the first artifact of release is the first artifact is this consistent play over like what is amounting to a few months now, where we are self-organizing into doing this. Like I'm not pitching anything, right? In the past, like that would have been the case. Like I'm trying to rouse interest and collect people into the thing, and like sort of painting a vision and hoping that like their money might show up so that you can keep them around or whatever. I don't know. Like here, we're just sort of like, we don't know how this thing is going to be made, but it kind of feels like this. And you paint this, and like, is that anything you're interested in? And some people are like, yes, I want to work on whatever the fuck that is. And you're like, okay. And then everybody sort of picks what they're going to do, like based on what needs doing and what feels fun to do. So that's our first artifact. It's the beginning of an organism that is self-organizing. And then we're starting to create a lot of media like this, right? Developing practices to engage with each other. We are doing a lot of talking about like how a protocol would work, and how like a media standard for like this, I think, is the thing that we are working towards, but don't know how far away we are from, is like a kind of format that allows different types of media to sit within it in relation to others. And if we can write up that format and then propose it as a kind of standard, then other people can help us build things that would relate to that. So maybe that's like an invitation to play that can draw in more people or whatever. I think we're going to continue to like churn through this thing until a project emerges that is an on-ramp for other people to engage with it. So that's my hope, that we're not too many iterations away from that. But I have no idea. Like, it's just sort of probing into the universe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just keep going. I mean, like, just keep coming up with games and ideas and conversations, and it's just, yeah, nobody knows exactly how to do something before they start, especially something like this.
Yeah.
Even something a lot more basic, you just don't know exactly what steps you're going to wind up needing to take.
Yep.
Like writing a song. Like, I've written quite a few songs and tunes, but I don't really know how it's the steps is always a little different of a process, and that you have to pay attention to. You have to listen to it. You have to listen to what it's telling you. And
So
and it's
that
hard to
point
do
right there.
it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes, because you develop an idea. Like, I did it this way before, and so I'm just gonna do. And there's like a lot of subtle, like, maybe not, maybe don't do it like that. Or there's just a lot of subtle things to listen to in the way you think when you're making stuff.
So what we're trying to do is bring that sensibility that you're describing to collaborative work. So, like, how do you
collaborative
listen
knowledge work? Yeah.
In particular, but work in general, I hope.
I
how do you?
It's not necessarily knowledge work.
Knowledge work is just the format that we're operating in now, because I think there's probably the most information technically on how to do that kind of work, which means that we can encode it more easily because we've got resources of people who have been studying it. That may be true of like more artistic works, or this kind of thing. But like, how can you imbue through practice and tooling and ethos a method of better listening as a group to what is looking to be made, right? Like, and then how do you uncover those frictions and resistances and all the stuff that you're talking about, like in writing a song? And practices about, like, last time we did it this way, and maybe this tool works again to uncover more of what we're trying to understand. But, like, what is the thing saying that it needs, right? Like, it is more operating like with a living organism than it is a machine. But it is using machine intelligence and helping you to do this. So, yeah. Cyborging.
I guess we are already cyborgs in one way or another.
Yeah.
Kind of at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking through an electric mediated device, all of us right now. I mean, it's an extension of our. See? That's what.
That's our project.
That's our project.
That's your project.
That was an hour-long explanation.
Yeah, the beep boop beeps is the summarization.
I think an idea that occurs to me, or that I'm feeling, is that what part of what you guys are about too, and this may be just my own projection. But I'll just say that too. But it is that we all kind of are like these evolving cyborgs in a way, but we also want to maintain touch or rediscover our humanity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we want to pay attention to each other and our bodies and emotions and stuff like that. I could see.
Yeah, it's back to your observation earlier when you were running. Like, get back into your body, right? Like, the body is a sensor to help you experience living, right? Like, and computing and technology in particular are extremely distracting from that realization. So like the sort of area of study that I'm interested in at least, but we sort of seem to be dancing around is like human computer relationship.
Yeah.
And like, what is the nature of that relationship? How do you have a healthy one? Like, what does that look like? Right. Like, and can software mediate that relationship in ways that are like beneficial to both the machine intelligences and the human intelligences so that they work better together? And there are upsides
That's
and
really
downsides to
exciting.
all of these things. Yeah.
That's exciting. It reminds me of Kristen, your Sabbath, your tech Sabbath. Are you still
Yeah.
doing?
Oh yeah. I haven't been. I don't know why it's been too hard to do on the road.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It doesn't like, yeah, I guess I feel more balanced with tech somehow.
Yeah.
I don't, maybe because we're socializing so much more
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
road. I've thought about this. I would like to institute it more often though, because it frees up, I don't know, you get to change the relationship you have with the technology and like changing in the perspective on it, which I think strengthens the relationship. It makes you more aware of what is happening in the relationship with tech.
Yeah. I'm trying to follow your lead on that and do that.
Yeah.
But, I haven't gotten to the point of full break, but I'm have some minimal. I have rules that allow for minimal usage. Like
Good.
I'm doing it on Sunday, which is I think the day you were doing it too.
Yeah. That's a
And
good Sabbath day too, I feel like.
I try to I for the first step is to just not do any fiddlehead work,
Mm.
and then but I've allowed myself to do like writing on the computer and then
Yeah.
movies and whatever music, but I want to like filter it down to just like only essential communication. Like say you're meeting somebody at the beach and you need to like change some details,
Yep. Yep.
like that, and then just try to like real minimal, like maybe I'm allowed to listen to music,
Yeah.
something, just something, I want to work towards that just slowly.
Yeah. I think doing those little experiments and then feeling into what it's like
Yeah.
is the first, rather than like doing a full fast or whatever, like, sort of stepping in and seeing like where your boundary conditions and maybe where there's resistances.
Yeah.
Right now I'm doing a thing where like I set my phone to grayscale. Like you can do that in the accessibility settings.
Oh, okay.
And
I'll try it.
it's like significantly less stimulating, like orders of magnitude less.
So
And
you're less likely to look at it.
yeah, that
Yeah,
for
are you less
sure.
likely?
I'm less likely to want to look at it, like
Hmm.
because it's dull and it annoys me because I'm
'Cause
so
it's
used
dull.
to the hyper sensation of the super crazy bright screen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so beautiful to me that like when I'm holding the thing, I'm just like, ugh, it like it's a withdrawal kind of thing, or something like that. So I'm feeling into that. Um, so that's a little practice.
I just did
Yeah,
it. That's
try
cool.
like sit with it for a little while. Like I've been doing it for like a week or so. John said that he did this for what, 6 months or something.
Oh
Um,
wow.
Yeah, I don't know that I could go that long, but even a few days, and if you turn the color back on, it fucking sears itself into your retinas. It's insane.
Is it
So,
comfortable?
is it what?
Did you find it to be uncomfortable when you turn the color back on?
It's like not eating fruit for a long time and then having a berry, and you're just like, oh, I forgot how nice that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Um, but it's less natural, I guess. You appreciate the color more. It doesn't fade into the background of normalcy. So yeah, it's
Cool.
what you notice is that like what I notice is how saturated my senses are all the time. Like, I definitely am noticing more colors in the real world.
Huh.
Like I am less inclined to like sunset now. I see more like in the morning during Qigong. I've noticed like, oh, I didn't notice that that was there. And I think this is related just because your sensory input is dampened some from like its standard like saturation. So it's a subtle thing, but if you're paying attention, it'll start shifting things around a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
What's for dinner tonight?
I'm just gonna put something in the oven right now that you
All right.
mentioned it.
I figured because you moved to the kitchen.
Yeah, I
What are you
preheated
making?
the oven. Some salmon. Salmon.
Salmon.
Slam on.
Slaymo. And then just some leftover like beans that we made and quinoa and cauliflower. I'm here by myself, so party.
Where's Melissa?
She's out with two girlfriends from Michigan.
Nice.
Kim, I don't know if you met Kimmy Madich. Oh, you did? And
Yeah, I
then
think I met Kimmy. Her husband is a musician, right?
Gavin, yeah.
Yeah,
Gavin and
I
I
met
do a
her.
show later, yeah. And then her friend Michelle from Muskegon, Michigan.
Okay. I don't know that I've met Michelle.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're out. And you asked earlier about Michigan, and it was good. It was a good trip. And we saw this house. We finally saw this house that we're in the process of buying.
Yeah.
It's pretty
That's
cool.
nice.
It's a very nice neighborhood. Very nice little town. The house needs a lot of work, but honestly, like if it was just kind of cleaned up, I would be happy just moving in and calling it a day. But like we're gonna put a bunch of work into it, and Melissa, that's why we got that. Melissa really wanted to take that project on.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't get divorced after we go through this renovation thing.
Trial by fire.
It'll make you stronger.
So far, so good. So far, we still like each other.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. So we bought it directly from a developer who's a family friend, and so we're just now about to close on the loan. So
cool.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Welcome to the
sign this.
The real world. Yeah. The first time I signed a mortgage loan, I must have asked like 40 questions. I went through with a pen and was like, and to the loan, whatever dude's name that I don't even know what his job was, but he was my point on this. He went through every one of my questions and responded. And
that's good.
I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things though, where like at the end of the day, like you're either going to sign it and get the loan or you're not and not get the loan. So
not like there's any negotiation happening.
But I like to know what I'm signing.
Sure.
That's all.
Yeah, I disagree with point 7A.
Yeah.
I disagree. I'd like to strike that. Well, this is a federal loan, so you can't do that.
I don't like the idea that I have to pay this thing back. Can we pull that out?
Yeah.
Especially the part about how you have to pay a huge chunk of interest to a bank. That part, I don't like that.
Yeah, you're like,
I just want to.
Can I pay someone else back?
Yeah. So I'm reading this book by David Graeber called Debt: The First 5,000 Years.
Death. First 5,000 years.
Debt. D-E-B-T.
Oh, that's
as in you're about to go into debt.
Yeah. Speaking of which, if you are interested in money and how it relates to psychology and religion and civilization and relationship with other people and business. This book is phenomenal. It is so
Jason is
bonkers.
interested in all of that. And the last time we talked, after we talked, Jason, Dave said that this was in person, it might not have been the last time, your understanding of money, he was like, he understands money and like how it moves and like flows. He's like, it was very enjoyable for Dave. So
that conversation we had on Bitcoin and blockchain.
yeah,
No, I'm really grateful that was helped a lot. Like I'm still trying to slowly understand all that stuff, and it's really fun learning project, and so it was really good to chat.
This book will help you understand all of it. It's helping me understand it. It's extremely chewy, but he writes.
What do you mean by chewy?
It's just like, I mean, he's going through 5,000 years of history, and like starts with like debt as like with a relationship to the idea of original sin, and like, you know, these kinds of things, and then builds up from there, citing example after example of like civilizations and how money came into being, how markets form and their relationship to the state, and then like showing through different cultures and periods of time, like how these models emerged and collapsed and emerged and collapsed, and like, you know, where feudalism comes from and then where capitalism comes from and all of these kinds of things. So
are you still reading it? You haven't finished it?
I'm in the Middle Ages right now.
Oh, okay.
So I'm about halfway through it.
Have you looked at the table of contents to see where it's going?
No.
Oh, because I'm just curious if he gets to Bitcoin.
I think so. He wrote the first version in 2011. So I imagine that he had like some instinct of virtual currencies, and there is a relationship between cash style economies and virtual credit style economies, and they like flip back and forth. And I think we're going into a credit style one. So my guess is the end of the book touches on, he wrote an update to it too recently. That's the one I got. So there's probably a bunch of stuff that he started writing. I mean, yeah.
Have you heard of the economist Richard Thaler?
The name sounds familiar.
I heard him interviewed on Freakonomics. He won a Nobel Prize for economics, and because he did a lot of like kind of game things to model different alternative economies, different than like cash and credit. And
interesting.
That's cool.
A few of his things really had a huge impact on well-being for people. One is the kidney market. Do you guys know about this?
No.
That had a good impact on well-being? Interesting.
Yeah, because you can't buy a kidney. You can't just with the force of your money buy. And the only way you can you can do this is if you can get a kidney is you just wait on this waiting list, or if somebody you knows donates a kidney. But the timing just doesn't work out that well.
No.
Locally, like the person you have, like my brother can donate a kidney. It just doesn't always work out. But with this economy, what he did is like he modeled like mathematically how it worked, that if my brother gives a kidney to somebody else, then he has that credit. Which he can transfer to me. And so he actually made this, and it saved so many lives because
it makes sense.
People can get a kidney.
Interesting.
That's really cool. Like it just like hearing, talking about like how economies can. It's just really interesting that money, how much we take it for granted. Like ask yourself what's going on. It's you don't understand it as well as you thought you did.
not at all. I mean, the level of like connection to like religion is extremely surprising. Like, it makes complete sense when you get down there, but like all
Right.
of these, all of the economic models, like Adam Smith coming up with capitalism, like he is full blown religious. It is connected to God, right? Like his concept of the economy it like creates economists, and economists are just priests of capitalism. Like, this is how you can look at this. They are practicing the understanding and the like sort of scripture of capitalism, and the practices and the faith and the logics of the thing. Yeah, and it's one of the world's most dominant religions right now.
I didn't realize that at all about capitalism. It's interesting because you normally think of capitalism as like almost the opposite of religion, but
Yeah.
that's pretty wrong, I think. Yeah, I want to feel into like the original sin idea.
Yeah.
I can almost make sense out of that because that's actually one of my favorite Bible stories because it's so many very like amazing ways to think about it. Like, well, just to go off on a tangent, that we it's a story of like the birth of consciousness.
Yeah.
We didn't know we were individuals, and then we did. And it's interesting too to think that that's not really bad. It's just sort of demonized in a way, but I don't know. It's just really cool. But I really wonder. It's almost like Adam and Eve were just like the ultimate communists, and then
I mean,
and then at a certain point, they realized that there's these separate things, and then they needed stuff. They needed clothes.
yeah.
They needed
And
food.
so you invent trade.
And like Adam had to go get a job, and Eve had
Exactly.
to like raise Cain and Abel and stay home, and
And then they're beating each other to death, and she's just like, this is brutal. And then,
yeah, they
so
What is the original sin?
it's eating the fruit of knowledge.
Eating the apple from the tree.
Right. But that's been really interpreted lots of different ways.
yeah.
That are lots of fun ways.
Yeah. So I went down to Florida, I think, since we last talked, and like hung out with my family. And one of the things that I did there was like start having more of a sort of, I don't know what to call it, a spiritual dialogue with my mother.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Which I've been putting off for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Because like her relationship to Christianity is oriented very much through like the teachings of the Bible and that languaging. And I was uncomfortable with like the narrowness of the ability to speak to that stuff, because my interests are broader spiritually. Yeah. Like, and it wasn't until I started finding like sort of things like meta-modern spirituality and these sort of these models that are like, take the whole of the understanding of spirituality and learn what they are. There is a language that they're all speaking to through different lenses, and then how can you hear like similarities and differences within those particular languages. And so I've been playing a lot with that. And one of the things that came up, like we were sitting around in the morning, and she's like reading the Bible every morning, or has like a passage from the Bible or something, and it was some Galatians.
Out loud or not?
No, she's like doing study by herself. I think she has some apps, and she has Bible study groups and these kinds of things. I'm not sure about all that, but she was reading some passage from Galatians about Paul, and Paul was doing something. There's some like sect of Christianity, early Christianity, and they have like lost their way somehow, and he's like reminding them of original sin or something like this. I forget the specifics, but in part of the like poking around all of this, I've been encountering like, Buddhism, like Taoism, like Hinduism, maybe Hinduism less so. There's no concept of original sin that way. Like it's more cyclical. Like like not that I understand. And then in Christianity, there are alternate takes on this too, where like Plotinus, for instance, has a concept of wholeness and the one, as opposed to the brokenness of original sin. This is how I formulate this. It's probably very simplistic, but like the original, like sort of teaching that I picked up on original sin, like it had such a negative effect on my outlook in the world. Like everything was put through this model of being indebted and being broken, and like any mistake I'd make, well, that's because I'm broken, right? Like this kind of thing. Right. And this concept that Jesus can clear the slate there. If you lose track of Jesus because you can't square it with reality anymore, then all you're left with is this fundamental brokenness and nihilism. It's a fucking mess. So
it's really a shame, thinking about it. Like the story could be really simple, but it's just been twisted by
totally
Paul and worse by people who came after. But thinking it through with you guys, like basically we're all in the garden right now.
Yeah.
We're all one with God, and then something happens where we view ourselves as separate, and that's really the original sin ultimately. But it got twisted in this way by it's too bad. I mean, there's a lot of early Christianity is different, like the what's it called, like the Gnostics, like
exactly.
Gospel of Thomas. It's super interesting, just because, and you really see that it's about this kind of personal relationship, salvation that was lost, because the later power structure and hierarchy of the church, that wouldn't benefit them because they wouldn't be needed anymore.
They needed to mediate the thing.
Yeah. So it's cool. That's cool. Like that you can actually, I'm curious, like what the conversation was like with your mom about this.
So it
ongoing
for sure. But that particular instantiation, I sort of was able to get across the idea that, okay, I understand original sin as a concept. I'm not arguing with it as a fundament, right? Like, I'm not saying it's wrong, right? But I think that there is an alternate point of view that works better for me, which is like wholeness to start, with the possibility of straying from wholeness, imbalance, off-centeredness, these kinds of things. Profanity and corruption still exist within that model, but like, what are you ultimately coming back to? It's this oneness, this wholeness, this, this illuminated thing, this lightness, this transcendent feeling, right? And I don't need things to be broken to fix it, or to have it be mediated by, so something in that realm, right? Like
brokenness to kind of as like a motivation.
Yeah, as a driving function. But that doesn't mean it, that doesn't exist, or it's trying to. So I don't know. This is sort of where I'm interested in the broader understanding of what wisdom looks like for different types of people.
Yeah. Me too.
In the general study of that thing. And in that study, I can have a conversation with her because I can hear what she's saying. If she says the Lord, okay, I can map that to stuff that I understand, right? Yeah. I can even use the nomenclature that she's using and she may hear the Lord Jesus Christ specifically as this instantiation of this person, or this entity that represents the Christian God, right? And I'm familiar with that. You can also see that as all of consciousness being aware of itself or something,
Yeah, I
and
suppose
then,
there's some Christians who maybe a more modern version who can see, or maybe who have an idea of God that's not something separate from themselves.
yeah,
There
that
must
one's tough
be some
though.
out there,
Yeah,
like not the traditional form, but there must be some
yeah,
people who like believe in Jesus, believe in God, but they're like, well, God is everything, we're part of it.
yeah.
I don't know if there's a name for that, but
Yeah, I think there's like some transcendental Christianity stuff that there. I've definitely run into people. I don't know what their particular sects or area or like schools of thought are, but things that are crossing over with Buddhism. The problem is that there are these inherent structures that like make certain things off limits, and you're having to do like pretty wild contortions to get to like some of the Christian mentalities to work with these other things.
yeah.
So yeah, that one's tough.
Yeah, that like trying to just, I think Paul really strengthened the idea of Jesus dying on the cross.
Yeah,
Your sin, dying for your sins. Like
yeah,
I'm pretty sure Jesus didn't do that. Yeah, but that's my
yeah,
belief. I don't think
sure.
he's like, well, I'm gonna die so that, yeah. I just don't. But that's, who knows. But I feel
I
like
mean, this is
that
so,
idea was
yeah.
introduced. That was layered on after he was gone.
So I think that part of the more progressive leaning discussion is around the concept of narrative, which you're poking at, like, and the idea that there can be an emergent narrative that works better for Christianity and the instantiation of the world that we're in now, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these people are Orthodox, and they're sort of going back to uh, back when they're saints, like sort of pre-Protestant mentalities, where having a direct relationship with God is a lot, and so it's almost so much that you just don't bother, like.
What do you mean
Uh,
that's a lot?
so there's something to like the way that some religious structures. I'm just riffing on this. I very am, yeah. Like there are some the pantheons and the sort of like even the sort of lesser gods of the saints within Catholicism, right? Like you can have a mediated relationship to the ultimate God, right? The absolute, the enormity of God through a saint. Like you can study the saints' behaviors, like what because they are special within the pantheon. They lived a life that was like channeling an aspect of spiritual practice that most people will never be able to encounter. But in their practice and in their teachings, there is a lesson about what it's like to relate to the ultimate, right? So you get a mediator function there, and
They
the,
like
each of
it sounds like they're a teacher.
yeah, and but it's so think about like God as like the infinite, all-encompassing everything, tapping directly into that without a mediator, without teaching,
Yeah.
without a
It's pretty
conduit,
Potent.
or
Yeah.
it's brutal. It can blow you up. So
Psychedelics.
yeah, and so Protestantism like sort of boils away all the saints, right? Um, and
that what your mom is? Is she more Protestant?
yeah, well, I don't know how to specifically pin her down, but I don't know enough about like what she believes and then the denominations that she's sort of. I think that's one of the things that I'd like to talk to her about.
Yeah.
It's a meta conversation, so I don't really know how to get to it. And like, her concept of the lineage of belief that she's been working through. I don't know that that's a narrative that she's working with. So we have to like find a common language there. But yeah, so anyhow,
But she probably doesn't want to talk around religion. Like she
Yeah.
wants to just talk directly about the teachings of Jesus and the story, right?
That's been my experience. So
You got it, dude.
So there's the possibility of like, if narrative is a function that is playable within Christianity, then what happens if we rejigger the narrative some, right? Because narrative has been malleable in the history of Christianity, and a lot of the Christian thinkers I've seen have a mentality that there is a new grand narrative that can emerge to like move Christianity forward, and that may be the case. There's a third testament or something. I don't know.
That's
like,
The Book
yeah,
of
the Book of Mormon. I mean, basically, I mean, there you go. So, like, I think that narrative is a component, but I like the mentality that narrative can be held loosely and spun up to understand the world through parable, through analogy, through metaphor, in shared practice. But sticking to any one narrative is like sticking to one identity. It doesn't make any sense. Not with all of what we know about the world. There are so many different instantiations of being in relationship with each other and with nature and with the beyond, that picking a single lane to operate in like seems unlikely. So how do you move between these things? You pick up different narratives. Like, so what is the world like if Jesus died on the cross? What is belief like if he didn't? Right? Like, what are the implications of those things? What is a narrative that works? Anyway. So I don't know. Something in that.
So would you actually think through what it would be like to think like a total Christian, to really think like that, like Jesus
I like
died
that.
for
A
our
total
sin.
Christian.
Yeah. I mean, I think that serious play and the ability to role play these things and engage with the logic in a way that is sacred, I think it takes practice. I think it takes being around people for whom you can talk to about this kind of thing, but I think that's completely doable. Like, it's sort of like spiritual anthropology. Your ethnography or something. And like, if some of those practices work for you, great. That's nice. I mean, that's great. If you can find a community for which the breadth of practice like covers what you need to exist in the world and help you define meaning and purpose and build wisdom and community and all those things, then great. But I think the likelihood for me that I'm going to find an existing community of practice that doesn't include the breadth of all of the potential of practice is pretty low. So
I wonder if there's any religions that purposely incorporate all the different religions. I think maybe Sikhism attempted to do that.
Yeah.
I do want to look into that. I think I think Sikhism might be but of course, like you have gurus who have attempted this, like
Yeah.
Rajneesh.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that series on him?
No.
Oh yeah, it's
Yes, you did.
Did I? Is that
that's Wild Wild.
Wild
Oh,
West.
yeah. Rajneesh, I think, is like how I understand, like Osho. So I've been poking around these areas. You may be interested in this, like tantric practice, like as like an extension of like Hindu, and then I think there's some Buddhism stuff from Tibet in there. And my understanding from listening to people who've been longtime practitioners are like the tantric practices are really cultural in nature. They are like you have the sutras, which are like sort of standardization of practice, like entry level stuff. I mean, there's obviously complexity and advanced practice in the sutras, but it's like, sort of prayers and community and sangha and these kinds of things. And, like fourfold this and nine path that and these kinds of things. And then you have tantric practice, which is an extension that pushes into like, say like desire or anger or sex or the things that are potent. And there is an understanding that can be gleaned from these, but civilizationally, there are boundary conditions in most of the wisdom traditions to keep most people from like straying too far afield because your civilization falls apart, I think. So you should be able to.
The practices are a little bit more extreme. Is that a way to put it?
Yeah. So definitely that they are more potent, and the way that I think they're delivered is like one in relation to the cultural time, right? Like so, say Osho had a recognition that there was a compatibility between his his school of thought and Americans, and understood some of the American drives like sex, money, like freedom in a certain way, like party, this sort of youthful attitude. And so he rearranged the teachings to be compatible with that mindset. But he had I think from what we watched, and I haven't done a lot of study about this, and those practices were very tantric, very sexual, very like liberative, and like transcendent through these like libidinal forces or whatever, which is why the thing fell to pieces, because it's crazy that you can't stabilize that, or one of the reasons. And so I think he had a thin understanding of the culture, because they went and bought all that land out by the most conservative people in Oregon, and like didn't make friends with them, and like set it up like a fucking like fortress. It makes no sense. All of that stuff is crazy. Like that's not like an adult mature like view of that worldview. It's crazy. So I think that's one of the tendencies with these kinds of things. They don't necessarily scale very well. They don't work in public very well. They require a sacred private space to be extremely vulnerable in ways, I think. And usually the mechanism of teaching is different than a guru. A guru, I guess, in general, is somebody you can mimic. You can observe their behavior and then maybe internalize them as a sage of sorts or something. And then through that, like sort of practice what it feels like to be like that. There's some component of that. The tantric teachers tend to be nuts, like crazy, like asocial in ways, or like off-putting or abrasive. And if you were to mimic their behavior, you would seem nuts. People wouldn't like it. So it is a sort of forcing function on figuring out for yourself, like based on your instantiation in the world, how to live. It's an embodied, practiced, sort of live action. Like you have to find your own way. Like it is not prescribed. Like but it is given to, there are teachings that you can, sort of onboard and play with yourself, I guess. And then you do it in practice with other people.
No, this is a good explanation that it's sort of pushing people to a point where they maybe have a breakthrough.
Yeah. And they're ready to do this because they have they have like primed themselves with previous sort of spiritual practice, usually, where they've done a lot of meditation, they've done a lot of sort of reflection work or therapy, who knows, all of these kinds of things, like yeah, and they're
It's
ready
like
to
the direct path, like the Sam
yeah,
Harris talks in his book, that book, Waking Up.
Dzogchen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's a tantric practice,
And
tantric practice.
they don't want to show that to just anybody, because if you don't get it,
Yeah,
and then you'll be set back so much because you're not ready for it. You've missed this golden thing, and you may just decide, oh, I shouldn't do that at all, and
yeah,
then you're really worse off than if they
yeah,
hadn't kind of shown it to you. Is the thinking anyway? Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, so this is the thing. These things are popping out left and right because information is becoming available about all of this stuff that has been locked away for good reason. A lot of these traditions had to like stay underground because this kind of thing and Christianity do not get along. Like, if there is like a sort of deity practice that symbolizes sexuality and like the full range of what it's possible to be as a sexual being, Christianity does not get along with that at all. There, it's completely off limits. It's so sinful as to be like shocking, right? Uh, uh, and it typically gets obliterated by the church. Like anytime any of these styles of practice pop up in Christianity, um, and the Western mentality around these kinds of things has spread into the East, I guess, and a lot of the temples that were like tantric temples have been like sort of knocked down and this kind of thing because they're just full of like statues of people having sex and or like different types of the extent of the understanding of these kinds of forces. So I don't know.
I wonder how Christianity, at what point it became that, like, so puritanical. Was it before the Puritans? I mean, I guess so, because in
Yeah,
the Middle Ages it was pretty restrictive.
yeah, I think it. I'm not sure the lineage on this, like because there's a bunch of the prescriptions, like prohibited stuff in the Old Testament, right? So it's like probably a bunch of this stuff aligns with the axial age revolution, and particularly
The actually,
like yeah, so that's when you get Judaism, Zoroastrianism, I think was the first one out of these. Judaism, Islam, Christianity. No, Judaism was before. Then you get Christianity and Islam and Jainism and Buddhism. All of these, like Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus.
This
Like
all
no,
came out of the axial age?
I think Jesus and Buddha for sure, and then maybe one other for the Hindus, and then Islam was a bit later. Uh, maybe, yeah, I think that's right. But yeah, generally the same period. You get Plato, you get Socrates, you get, and then later Aristotle. Like this whole period, most of what we know about the world comes from this.
Oh.
You get the alphabet, you get a bunch of crazy shit. This is all within some hundreds of years period.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, before that, things are dramatically different, and after things are dramatically different. Um, and part of this was the emergence of patriarchal sort of modeling of the world. Um, and this debt book goes into some of this and how this mentality like affected ownership of women and women as currency and a lot of crazy shit there. And
Mhm.
then if women are extremely valuable, like, um, and certain types of value mean that you don't want they're your property, and so you don't want any other men looking at your property because the value is diminished somehow, whatever. And if another man had sex with that property, it's even more diminished. So you start covering the property, like burqas show up, veils show up, so this like hiding away of feminine sexuality is like probably part and parcel of this puritanical, like, don't mix the sexes outside of, there's probably some componentry in here somewhere. Because there are other civilizations for whom this is not a fucking thing at all. Like, there are different gender dynamics, sexual, like, sort of, yeah.
But women aren't viewed as objects as much.
I mean, there are, people in general aren't, but yeah, like, I think this last 2,000 years has been a potent version of that. But yeah, I don't have the full, anyhow, that's maybe where some of that stuff comes from. But like also things like anger, intense emotions of different types, like there's a bunch of
We're
stuff
like
that's
very not a tantric society in the US.
no, because we're primarily a Christian society.
So
Or the
Christianity
founding,
feels pretty oppressive.
it can be.
Yeah,
There are lots.
why are these things off limits? Why is sexuality, which is like integral to who we are, and anger, which is integral to who we are, seen as off limits? Like, it makes me irrationally angry.
Well, because it's been repressed.
It just seems so like barbaric to attempt to take from people what makes them people and say, you cannot have that. That is a form of slavery. You're enslaving yourself to not be able to feel like, to be like, you can't get rid of that stuff. You're caging part of you. I don't know, it just is, it's wild to me. Like it served a purpose at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't think it's inherently bad, but
there are restrictions on sexuality and anger. It helps the society, and so like these moral things. I mean, if I don't sleep with my wife's friend, then everybody gets along better. Maybe I want
Yeah.
to, and I have to repress that. But then the sum
yeah,
thing, some result is like, well, we're gonna all be happier if we behave and follow these. If I don't get pissed off and kill somebody, and if maybe there's rules that keep me from getting pissed off, like, and then that's the burkas too, like if I don't
Yeah.
see my neighbor's wife, and see how beautiful she is, then I'll be less likely to behave badly. So
yep.
that's what I always thought that was behind the burkas and
Yeah,
but
there's a bunch of different avenues to it. I mean, this shows up over and over again. Like, there are sort of biological pressures or like sensibilities or tendencies or behaviors. And depending on like how the civilization is oriented, or if there is a civilization at all, right? There are social mechanisms for managing through the development of human beings, like where these energies go, right? And the community or the tribe or the town or the village or the civilization like needs coordinating logics to mediate all this stuff. And you have like different primal sources, like, so in some cases you end up with this situation where, like, the most valuable thing are like untouched women or something like this, like virginal women, and then you develop an entire like
Economy.
subcaste of prostitution because men like need some access to women, right? So like you're off, like the society has agreed to offload that energy into a sort of black or gray market or above, like market prostitution, these kinds of things. Yeah, and then there are other like sort of tribal societies that have like matriarchal rule, where there are different models of this kind of stuff. It's yeah. So these like libidinal forces, like have different needs for like management across large swaths of people. Yeah, so that's what we came up with, and we've outgrown it.
Yeah.
Well, that seems like a big part of where my frustration comes, is that as we developed as a species over time, it doesn't seem that a lot of our religious and other social practices have grown with us. We've become reliant on some outdated code, I guess.
This is partially, I think, situational in relationship to the Enlightenment, at least in the West. The cultural Enlightenment that brought us objective, like heavy objective measure of the world, and the secularization, like particularly the separation of church and state. This goes along with like Protestantism, and like the formation of the United States, and like, you know, God is still in there, but like the market and market forces and like sort of relationship to objective reality has like taken over for the like sort of magical divine spiritual relationship to being, which is where, and there's a bunch of stuff, like Nietzsche talks about this, Heidegger talks about this, like there's a bunch of people talking about this, like the death of God is basically this, the ability to understand God in the forms that we understood before, because we have such a fundamental understanding of the physical quality of that part of reality, and we have over indexed on that kind of thing, which leads you to meaningless matter in the world. And that's, if you believe that that's all there is, then there's not much, right? Like, yeah. So I think that the meaning, I mean, I think fucking John Vervaeke thinks, and all these other bright people think, that this has led to this meaning crisis. There's very little for you to hang your hat on, like in a spiritual sense, which means that from this, we need to form things that are like religion that came before, but with a conscious understanding of what the wisdom traditions are doing for us, right? So this is the concept of a religion that's not a religion, like something that doesn't require all the dogmatic and like spurious beliefs based that are hard to justify, you know, in any sort of, it has to get along with science. It has to get along with the objective measure of the world and have a sensitivity towards the divine. Those things need to be able to converse with each other. And the systems that we've had for the past 500 years, they've been being boiled down to nothing, right? Like, you know, churches are museums now. Like that's the big cathedrals and stuff. Like you go in to check out the cool artwork and stuff like that. You're not really going there to, it's not it is still a living practice to like billions of people. So but you know, the sensibility needs to be updated for a networked, all information is available age kind of thing, I think. So
it's really interesting how we've come right back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. That's what the meaning crisis is. It's Adam and Eve. They've lost the meaning of life because they've lost the connection to the garden, and like I choose to look at it as that it's an ongoing story, and it's not like there's not an angry God who's left us because we're not obeying him. I choose to look at it as like it's an ongoing story. Like that's what the great myths, they teach us, that like things that we can do in our life, then that we can learn from that. And like another layer of it is you can believe in science and believe in the story of the Garden of Eden. It's a story. The story is
Yeah.
there to get you to practice and consider your relationship to the world. It's not a literal truth. So it doesn't have to be, if you have that way of thinking about it, then you can be a Christian and be a scientist, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. I think both are practicable. That's the point.
Yeah.
And like the practice of one should inform the practice of the other. Like if they are done, like, I mean, you get all of the like great thinkers or whatever who are in like groups of thinking or whatever tend to have like a mystical like orientation. Like they are tapped into something beyond, and it is typically like a spiritual experience that is because they are understanding some fundament of reality, right? And then bringing that forth in practice and in communion with you know God or the universe or whatever. Um, yeah, I don't know. Einstein talks about this. Fucking Adam Smith in the Capitalism, like he's just having like these these like mystical visions of what reality can be, and they just happen to be tied into math, you know. And Newton is doing the same thing. He is like, God is a machine, and all of us are component cogs in this machine because he had a pretty like autistic view of the world, right? Like, um,
So he was religious.
super religious.
Oh,
He spent like he found calculus and then he spent an inordinate amount of time trying to find mathematical patterning in the Bible.
hmm.
Who is this?
Isaac Newton. Yeah, so I
Probably
mean this
drove
stuff goes
himself
hand in
crazy.
hand everywhere. Yeah, I mean, so I don't think the idea that they're detachable is a sort of it's a modern, a newer invention, you know, necessary because the church had such like sway over all of thinking. Um, and like science needed to develop on its own effectively, its own practices, its own like methodology, its own understanding. But science needs like a wise governance too. Like they work in tandem. Like it should also be able to explain the immense amount of human experience for which can't be touched, is not tangible, right? And can't be measured yet. You know, maybe there's a science of magic.
I like that.
Probably.
Science needs wise governance. That there has to be some kind of understanding that there's more to the world than merely what we can prove.
Yeah. Yeah, it's back to the, you know, if it is Adam and Eve in the garden, it is the wisdom to stay connected to the garden, but also understand what connects one to a garden, how the garden got there, what is the formation and operation of the garden so that it can be tended, you know, like how humans should relate to each other and the garden, you know, what the relationship to the knowledge of good and evil should be, and what is a wise relationship to picking apples because we can and we know we can and we are conscious of the ability to both pick and grow apples, right? Like these are all like the garden got complex, and you know you need ways to mediate. I mean, yeah, this is a religious sensibility, and religion being just the sort of conduits and containers of like group practice and understanding of practice, right? Like rather than spirituality, which is like sort of an individual relationship with divine and whatever the practice is there. Um, there needs to be something that is in alignment with like stewarding the planet, like which is the garden again, right? Like what is the relationship to Earth as the only place we've got to live right now, and the only place for the foreseeable future that is going to be worth living. Like there's Mars as an option if the goofballs get there. That's fine for them. I'm not going there. I'd prefer to we got a lot here. It's good.
So we could just add to the sequel to the Adam and Eve story. Then is they learn to garden,
basically, and then how gardening works and sustainable methods of gardening, and
then they never leave the garden though.
Good.
Good.
What do you mean they never? The garden is paradise. They never left the garden in the first place.
There's no such thing as paradise, though.
What? I mean, what?
I mean, that just sounds like a fairy tale. Adam and Eve never leave the garden. It's paradise. It's really great. Like, what?
Right, no, that's a good...
It seems simplistic.
But
like, it seems very like fantastical and happy ending. I don't know. I didn't see us going there. But I like them tending the garden, but never leaving. I don't know.
Well, that's why it's a living story and it's a living myth. It's never. They're always leaving the garden and coming, and it's just in. I'm not explaining this well, but it's a constant story that happens. Mm-hmm. It's not just like that's, and maybe like the idea of them being gardeners is part of it, but you're all, I mean, I'm just thinking about a person in their life, and you're moving between like ultimate like great feelings of connection and then feeling depressed, and you're constantly having to be reborn. You're constantly learning something like eating the apple, but then you're becoming proud of like how great you are that you learned how Bitcoin works, and then now all of a sudden you say something and you act like you show that you really are ignorant, and then you're back out of the garden. It's just kind of like it's an ongoing thing. That's the way I see it. But
yeah, there's another model of the garden too. Like, I mean, there's many models, but like, so the simplistic baby version of the thing is that we're in the garden, and like, so this is all the ignorance and knowledge is original sin, which it doesn't do anything for me, right? Like the knowing of your like self-consciousness is originally a broken contract or whatever with the divine. Okay, fine. Or it could be that you are in paradise already. Everything is great. It's fine. Like, but we have tendencies to be curious about how paradise works, what's beyond paradise. Like, we have tendencies to other things, to move in directions that separate us from the knowledge of paradise. And wisdom practice is coming back to the understanding that you're already in paradise. Like, so this is the Dzogchen thing. You're already there. Just look, right? So like, that can mean that like you virtualize the idea that you leave paradise, and maybe you leave the planet, you go to Mars. How do you then recapture the idea that Mars now encompasses paradise as well, and then it needs to have some relationship to Earth? And that narrative can work for people, or potentially could, and that's just a thing to try on, right? Like, maybe that works in the circumstance that you're in. Like, you're depressed and you're like, well, I'm already there. How do I see that I'm already there, right? And then that's a practice to like re-engage with the world.
What is paradise though? That's what I'm finding okay. Like reactivity to for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. What do you define paradise as?
I don't know. I don't know that I believe in paradise. Like, it has too much of a weight attached to it from this like departure from the capitalist machine. You can go experience paradise, but you can't have it for too long. It's like you paradise can buy it.
It's beyond you. You can if you buy this product, then you'll be in paradise.
Or you can buy a trip and go to the beaches in Bora Bora, and you can be in paradise, but then you can't stay. You don't get like, this is like, there's a cultural thing with paradise. So I think I'm just like,
Yeah.
I have to
So
like strip away all of that. So, cause like part of what you're always in paradise, and like, there's a thing with yogic practices where there's 3 yoga minds. This is new to me. So positive thinking, negative thinking, and then just being with what is. So get rid of the negative thoughts, get
yeah,
rid of even the positive thoughts of things that you enjoy, and just be present with what is. That is paradise. It's an equanimous, like, sort of, you're taking things as it comes. Your body and mind as a channel and just for experience.
that's
That
my
would be,
definition of paradise.
yeah, that would.
So redesign
But
it around.
it's super hard for my mind to be like I'm like, that's not paradise though. It's not what I've been sold as paradise. It just, I get it, but it's hard for whatever reason to. Yeah, how do you unlearn things? That's an interesting, like, oh, that was loud.
I have a thought on the paradise idea that, and your problem with paradise, the word, it,
Mhm.
it's pretty much just restating a Buddhist idea I've been thinking about recently, which is in Buddhism, like paradise would probably be called enlightenment or nirvana. It's
Yep.
a state where you're free of suffering, where you're not attached, where you're one with kindness, or however else you want to describe it. And, and so there's this idea of attaining enlightenment. So there's a provisional teaching and then an absolute teaching. And provisionally, you want to, oh yeah, I'm here. I want to get there. I want to go from point burrito to point taco. I want I want to be enlightened. That sounds good to me. And then it gets you practicing. And then once you learn a little bit, you realize, no, like this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
It's absolute. You were already there. Before you were already enlightened. You already had this awareness. You already had it. But we needed to give you this provisional idea, and we're not trying to like trick you with it. It's a compassionate teaching to get you going, because otherwise you may never get going. So it's maybe that's what's with paradise too. I don't know, but maybe the idea is like, well, it gets you showing up to church and being a good person or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, so the model of paradise that I think Kristen is reacting to, and I've had this reaction too, but
Your echoing voice is very,
what?
your echoing voice is very,
Echoey?
yeah, like
I don't know what changed.
we're in church now. It feels like large.
Well, it's because I'm in a big ass room. My
Room
headphones
covered.
died.
Oh,
That's
okay.
fine.
Oh, cool.
They should be back though.
No, I like it. I like it.
No, it's fine.
Keep the dream alive.
It's for me with headphones in, it's like way noticeable. Like
Yeah.
you amplified.
Well, so the thing that I think you were feeling into, or my understanding of what you were feeling into from personal experience, and you asked about how you sort of deprogram or unlearn some of these things. My experience is to understand where they come from and how they got to be the way they are. Like, so
Sure.
paradise as like an advertising pitch that is related to vacationing, which is related to the Protestant work ethic, which is related to doing a lot of work and then being able to take a break from that work because you earned it, and then you can spend that byproduct on a vacation. That is a fractal idea of heaven, and the idea of the two worlds mythology, that the world that you're in right now is broken and a fractured, like non version of it's something that you need to suffer through to get to your reward, which is heaven, right? Unless you're bad, then you go to hell.
Then you go down. Yeah.
So, which is,
I think,
placing paradise after death, so that you you know, and it's workable for some people depending on your level of, I mean, it can reduce suffering in the short term, but, you know, yeah.
I also think that the the problem with paradise, as we've been taught, is it's an objectification of being. So you can't have it. Like, so what tipped me off on this was Jason saying something about like the attainment of enlightenment, and a lot of people in Western cultures think they can get enlightened. I can go get enlightened. What are the steps that I can take so that I can have enlightenment, not
like a diploma?
And that once you've reached enlightenment, you've attained, like you've arrived or something, where it's something more akin to what Jason was saying again about a story that is constantly being rewritten.
Yeah.
It's enacted, it's a process, it's always unfolding. Whereas, a paradise that you can have in some way, whether it's a purchased thing that you can hold or it's a place that you can go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the objectification of mentality. It just doesn't work. And this is why it feels empty, because this word has lost like a activated, lively meaning. It's no longer.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder how many Christians really believe in heaven. They really believe they're going somewhere. I mean, it seems like kind of a major feature of the religion to keep you going, you know, and to give you solace in the face of death and pain. Like, well, I'm going to go to heaven.
It's just interesting to think of like using the word feature and working in software design and talk about building software. So yeah, like like religions as programs for a living. What's the feature set?
Yeah.
It's just interesting to think about it that way, because religions are designed too. It's not software, but it's a technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I'd be curious to know, for those who think that they are going to have, what is their conceptualization of heaven? Like, what does it mean to them? I'm curious about that. Because is it an objective plate? Like, do they think they're going somewhere? That there is like a physical place, or like a space of like a space-time sort of thing? Yeah. How do people think about that? I'm sure there's a million different ways of thinking about it, but it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've run into some, like there's a developmental quality to all thought, but you know, Christian thought as well. And there's a traditional view that is more magical in nature, which is like it's a place and you're going to go there and you know you're going to be happy forever, right? And you're going to have you're going to be immortal. But like if you grow past that a little bit and you start thinking about it, like, all right, I'm going to be in heaven and I'm going to live forever and nothing will ever change. That is terrifying.
Doesn't sound great.
Nothing happens. Like you don't have any wants or desires or needs. So if you end up with that sensibility, which anybody who has any sort of theological leanings will get there eventually, right? You have to sort of rejigger things. And I think what happens is like death is still necessary, right? And inevitable. And if you come to terms with that, then and you still believe in heaven and hell or like a conception of those things, they can move to a more psychological, like you can experience heaven and hell on earth kind of thing. Like addiction and isolation and, you know, types of profanity are hell on earth, right? A person is living in hell versus, you know, maybe good Christian practice, and all of the in engaging in the world in an activated Christian manner is like close to heaven, and you're leaving I don't know, like this, something like this is probably closer to what, like, my guess. I think I've encountered some of this, like,
Did people actually look at it this way?
yeah, I think with even more, I mean, definitely with more sophistication than what I'm saying, but like
Yeah.
the concept of like a bearded god, obviously, like that's not a thing anymore. The idea of heaven as place, hell as forever torture after death is just, it's too fantastical for like any mind that can square reality. And if you look at sort of suffering now, like there are plenty of hells available before death. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean that's how I would view those terms for sure. I
Yeah,
wonder. It's just a lot of Christians like seem to believe in a very literal
yeah,
view the literal interpretation, but that certainly makes crystal clear sense to me. Like what hell that it's here on earth, heaven and hell.
yeah. I think the Buddhist sensibility around this, like, or the like samsara things and the cyclical nature of like return, and this kind of thing that you're processing through multiple lifetimes or something like this, and then uh like how that relates to individual and like reincarnation, and
Mhm.
like these sort of mental models around like how you're operating within the time that you've got, right? um I don't know, I think that like, without, obviously death has to like be a real presence in whatever mentality you have about the the relationship to the time that you have alive, right?
But
um
unless you believe that your consciousness is something that's higher than just your body, you unless you have the belief that that there's nothing like inherently provable that the consciousness we experience is born from this body. Who knows, we just don't know much about it. So if you have the belief that this is just some universal thing that's happening, this body's going to die, that's
yeah,
pretty, but you know
yeah, I think we're that, so like this is a big discussion in like the cognitive science. Where does consciousness come from? Is it an emergent quality of human minds, right? And there's the individualistic model, there is a collective model. I tend to favor the collective, like unconscious thing, like because psychologically, like there's a bunch of evidence here that like we share a brain, like we do, like like you get emergent understandings across the globe at different times in history, and like you can
Yep.
explain that, but like how do we pick up these things, right? We there is a sort of field of consciousness, and then you get things like weird quantum entanglement things, that like there are relations across space-time that are hard to explain with relativity and the physical like understanding of these kinds of things. It's starting to get esoteric and into places that religion and oddball understandings of. So there's also the thing that like lineage, like anthropology, basic science there, like you can sort, you are inheriting a way of thinking and a way of being that has been handed down. And so your ancestor and ancestors going way back, even biological ancestors, are providing throughput and conditioning that you are enacting, right? So in that very like tangible sense, like there is a continuation. And so a type of lineage is bringing new thinking and new ways of being and interactions and relationing into the world, and the resonance of those ripples out through, you know, at least the immediately following generation and the generation, you know, but dependent on your, you know, contribution to that larger field, I don't know, that at least is just ripples and ponds, if nothing else. But I think that there's probably a deeper connection to that somehow. But yeah, like, you know, do you come back as a newt afterwards? I don't know that that's the case. I mean,
You can
won't
only
know
hope.
until you do. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the sort of, I think it's a fundament of Kundalini yoga is a phrase Sata Nama, which means birth, life, death, rebirth. So like a cyclical thing. And like that pattern, you can just, I don't know, there's something super comforting about it when you're doing Kundalini poses, because there's egoic death that you encounter, and like your body's telling you to stop doing it, and you're just like, if you can sort of take on that message that it's just cycling, everything is cycling, the breath is cycling, the muscles are doing something, like everything is just, the energy is cycling, it's okay. Like, I don't know, it's a weird, the cyclical nature of things feels very
in Kundalini,
intuitive then.
do they explicitly say that certain poses or phases of a routine are sa and certain points are ta, or is it just sort of a cyclical thing that to be reminded of as you work through it?
It's like a mantra, and you'll pull in the mantra in certain times. So like the way that my understanding of the way Kundalini and other yoga works, but Kundalini specifically, because it's explicit about you're cultivating the subtle energy body. So the energy that flows through and animates the body, consciousness, I guess, but your conscious, like what you are closer to, body and mind. So the way that it's structured is through kriyas, which are sets of postures, and they're explicitly designed. So this posture, then this posture, then this posture, then this posture, to achieve some kind of experience. So there's, I mean, it's for any, like Kundalini kriya for depression, for energy, for grief, like
there's like prescriptions.
Yeah, and you work the energy in specific ways then. So there's one of my favorite ones is for like letting go of the past and welcoming the new. I just like that kriya set that I found in the online program that I use, and I think it's that one where at one point you're punching and just doing sa ta na ma sa, and you're in the horseman's stance, so your knees are kind of bent, and I think it's for like 5 minutes, and it's just super enjoyable. I don't know, I mean, you do things leading up to it, but
now when you do it, are you thinking, like, what is it, birth, life, death,
rebirth?
Are you thinking that, or you just have like kind of playfully singing it and doing the motion?
I go back and forth, like, because there's part of it begins like it's like learning a new language. There's like that translation, that sata nama, it means birth, life, death, rebirth. And so as the brain is sort of like taking it on, I'll switch back and forth between them, but it starts to mean that to me when I'm saying sata nama. It's interesting too, because like the close out for Kundalini is typically Sat Nam, which I think is just a truncated version of that. I'm not sure about that. I mean, Kundalini is awesome. There's all kinds of, like, there's one of the other like mantras is Wahe Guru, which just means wow, like just awesome, like holy shit, like look at this, look at we are experiencing and being, just like when the teacher described, I just love it. Like it's actually like that's
one,
encoded in the practice.
what's that one again?
Wahe Guru, Wahe Guru, Wahe Guru. So you'll do things like, yeah, there's one, I don't know if it's that same Kriya. You're doing sniffs in 4, which might be to Satanama. It might be. And she chants for you, but you could do it in your head. So as you're breathing in, sa, ta, na, ma, sniffing in by 4s, and then you exhale in 4 to wa, he, guru. I think you just let it out. You don't have to do it in the metered, but.
Oh, so you combine both. Here, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wahe Guru.
Wahe Guru. Yeah.
There's equivalents in the Qigong too, with Chinese medicine. Like you're doing purging and tonifying and circulation of like subtle energies, the qi. You're combining, there are certain exercises with pressure points and these kinds of things, and the body is mapped in such a way that there are certain ailments and energy clogs and these kinds of things, and the practices are meant to like sort of move that stuff around, keep like they prize flow over stagnation and this kind of thing. There's like, what is it, repulsing the monkey is one of the like sort of mindful things, and you do this, you bring it back and then move it through, and
Repulsing
then
the monkey.
you're pulling thoughts from behind and then pushing them through into the future. You're bringing your past stuff and you're breathing it out, lots of this stuff. So that's for the mental kind of quantities. And then,
A certain descriptive as well. You like,
yeah,
like right now, what I'm trying to do is let go of like past thoughts. I'm feeling like bad and too nostalgic, and it's just like a healthy practice of.
yeah, there's these different flows, and then you have like, the same thing that I think lines up with the chakras or whatever. You've got a point here, a point here, a point here at the heart, and they go down into your dantian, where you store your centralized sort of core energy, and you're moving from center all the time, and passing things through. There's lots of like pull it from heaven down to earth, these movements, the 6 directions, and you move things through them, like creating bubbles of energy, like fields to maintain healthy energy with yourself, and repulse or like boundary condition stuff. And I don't know, there's lots of this kind of thing.
That's
I don't,
cool.
yeah, you can like, I'm just doing mostly just the practices or whatever in like a bodily mindfulness way, like just sort of the concept of, oh, there's a bunch of like the healing sounds that you do in relation to out breaths. There's a heart sound, which is, and then what is it? The liver sound, I think, is,
What's
yeah.
that one? I hear you doing that sometimes.
There's
whenever I hear making them sounds, I want to do them, and then I'm like, that's distracting if I'm in the background just being like,
yeah, hissing at me.
Yeah. It's fun though.
Yeah, there's 6 total, and then there's the triple warmer sound is the one you're talking about. That's like it's like, yeah, it's like a HEEE, he. Yeah. Anyways, and there's like
feels good.
a few of these. Anyways, and like there's one for the spleen, one for the kidneys. a lung sound. And so you go through each of these, and like the heart sound is the one where you're holding emotions in the chest or whatever, and you'll do some purging exercise, and like things will build up, and like you'll lift something up, and then you'll or like push it out, or these kinds of things. It works to some degree.
How often do you pick a particular like prescription for a way to perhaps counter a way you feel versus just doing a general practice of mind body connection or something?
So I do Qigong every morning, like for 30 minutes to an hour. And the thing I'm following is it's like a sort of online class. So he's got 3 new ones a week, which are sort of following a train of the community. Like he feels into what needs to be done, and then he builds like a routine around that, It's pretty interesting. And then there's a back catalog of some of them, but not like a ton. And then I have like another subscription to some that are more particular, but there's a couple of them that are like sort of silent and meditative, and I tend to do those on the off days where there's not new ones. But yeah, nothing like super prescriptive. Like they could. I think this will happen at some point. Like, there's stuff on YouTube. So when my back was giving me a lot of trouble, like because from packing and moving and doing all this stuff, there's like particular like relaxation ones to do, like to help relax your back.
Doing Qigong.
No, I hurt my shoulders doing Qigong.
Oh, shoulders. Right as we were moving, he's like, I can't lift things. I was like, well, that's convenient. And then he's like, I'll just tough it out. And I'm like, no, you're not lifting anything. That was funny.
I toughed it out.
Best you could with me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not to lift things.
I don't know if you do particularly prescriptive.
Me?
No, but I actually.
Do you do Qigong? How do you say it? I forget now.
Qigong.
I did Tai Chi in college, and I really liked it, and then I just stopped after that. But but here, kind of like where this discussion got led, like I really want to. I have like a weird neck thing, and I don't want to. It just kind of comes and goes. Like I'll get a super stiff neck.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there's some kind of simple like physical
big
therapy.
Time. There's a bunch of Qigong stuff for this for sure. But yeah.
Okay, I'll investigate. That's cool to know though.
Half the exercises are like you warm up and then you get in a position and then like your arms are out and then you just slowly with the breath like move your neck, ear to your shoulder back and forth, and then you change the orientation of your arms.
Rotation.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different like slow, and it slowly releases with the breath, like the tension you're holding in your neck. And then there's a bunch of interconnected stuff for that. So,
do you have a YouTube person you could recommend for Qigong who would?
There's 3 main ones that pop up. Lee Holden is the dude out of Santa Cruz that I follow the most.
Holden. Yeah.
And then
he's got a lady that's nice too.
She's all right. She's very polished. She comes over from yoga more. So she goes by Yochi.
That's probably why I like her.
Yoqi. She has a bunch on there.
Yoga Qigong.
Yeah. And then there's one woman who's like, I think in France, she has like 1 billion videos. So you're likely to run into specific exercises from her. She just cranks out stuff. So like, breathing for back and neck and shoulder tightness before bed, like every possible algorithmic combination of but she's good though. They tend to be like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. They're usually like more bite-sized. And then if ever you want, like I've got the login for the Lee Holden thing if you want to check out that stuff.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
If I'm into it, I could subscribe too.
Yeah. It's $40 a month. So
does he do live classes or he's mainly just posting?
live classes, 3 times a week. And then there's like a Zoom meetup and question and answer thing beforehand. He gets a sort of feel for where people are at, like answers questions and then does a routine. I think he improvs a fair amount of it. He's got the whole thing set up like a science. Then he's got people running his community. I think it's worth looking at the community. I was a little like annoyed with it at first because I just wanted an on-demand library so that I could go through and do whatever the hell I want. But I like this live cadence thing. It's interesting.
And he personally does 3 a week?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. How long are they?
They're hour classes. I mean, it's just an extension of his like in-person like dojo or whatever the hell you call a Qigong studio. He's prolific too. He's like doing like courses, like he does lots of theory on top of it. And then his like presentational skills are like bonkers. He's a special person. He also has a fucking newborn and then like 4 other kids.
Oh wow, I didn't know he had a bunch of kids too.
He has a bunch of kids, has like a new baby that's like 6 months old. He's like the chillest guy. The baby shows up at the thing every once in a while and it's like, he calls it a little chi baby. And it's like just chill every time it's on camera.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know. He lives a special life, this guy.
And when you said his community, people from the community run it, what does that look like? Like, what are they doing?
I am sort of reverse engineering based on like sort of taking a look at their comms and like how the thing is sort of put together. There's definitely somebody filming and they have like a studio in Santa Cruz, like a workout place, which they probably have in-person classes, but for COVID, he's just been filming the thing. They have multiple camera angles, and they like sort of cut back and forth between those over the course of an hour. It's filmed professionally, so somebody is managing all that media because they're producing a fair amount of it. His site has a bunch of different like courses, and things for sale. He's been doing this for like 30 years, I think. So there are people who are managing the business side of things. There's definitely somebody handling comms, maybe a couple people. And they're trying different experiments with like content marketing.
What are comms?
Just communications.
Oh,
so
comms.
Yeah. Like at least 2 people like playing with different voice stuff, and then they're trying different like kinds of, I don't know, like show up and have tea with him or those kinds of things, right? So like I think his following is pretty large. Like some of his videos on YouTube have like millions of views. So and he may have like 100,000, maybe more followers on YouTube. So subscribers. And that, I don't know what you have a better idea of what that indicates.
Well, it's I don't know. I mean, sometimes it means just that you had a viral cat video or something.
Totally, yeah. And like you picked up a bunch of people. My instinct is that he has a thriving business that's making good money. Like, yeah. Probably like a decent subscribership at $40 a month, and then people in person, and then these like teaching on-demand stuff. Like it's providing for a big family, and then some employees for sure.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, no, I'm glad we went down that rabbit hole. It seems like somebody I could learn from. But on the immediate thing, neck pain, and then
Mm-hmm.
how to run a better online course. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, the live component thing I think is really interesting. Like getting people to show up and then like doing a practice together and then recording that and then sending it out so that the larger community that can't be there in person, like I've enjoyed it because I haven't really gone to any of the live ones.
Does he do it on Zoom or some other platform?
Zoom, and then the
How many
the
people
soft.
up to them?
I'm not sure. I feel like dozens.
Oh, but you've attended them, right?
No, I've only seen video.
Oh, okay.
Um, I've not popped in live. I usually get the recorded post video or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah. I think there's like a trial and stuff too. You can poke around in. You can see how they're doing all that. I didn't really understand how it worked. They're not great at communicating all that stuff. And like my initial impression was like, because I had this expectation of like a on-demand library. So they don't do the best job of like giving outsiders to the community an idea of what's going on, but like, you feel it out. So
Yeah. Cool. I have to go get a cable for my computer. It's about to die. Keep going, or should we call it?
Should probably call it.
yeah.
Start unwinding so I can rest easy tonight.
Mm-hmm.
This has been nice though.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really great to catch up. Like, as usual, just deep conversations, traveling far, coming back, taking off again. So, thank you guys so much. It's always so fun.
Yeah.
I always a lot from you guys and feel like my brain is expanded. So, thank you.
The religious stuff was really fun this time. I didn't know that
You
was
guys
as
know
active.
so much about religion. I don't know a lot. I just listen.
It's really interesting.
Slowly piece it together. Yeah.
It's really fun to.
I think you're gonna love that debt book. If
Yeah.
and when you get to it,
Very long. It sounds long.
It's long. I mean, it's so interesting though that like I started making myself like mentally sick reading it because I highlighted half the damn book. So far, like, and I'm making annotations and like on the Kindle app or whatever. So yeah, it's long but fascinating. So you don't really, or I don't notice anyway. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I took note.
Cool, man.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
hope to see you guys soon and really have a great time there in Mexico.
Will do.
Yeah.
All right.
Tell Melissa hello.
I will. I'll tell her hi.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.